Hello. I just wanted to make a little announcement. Um, Sorry that we haven't been posting as much as we wanted to on Patreon. I've been a little under the weather. I think I'm getting better, but it's a slow process. Um, so I was supposed to be having a vacation too, but my vacation has largely consisted of convalescence. Um, but there's good news too. The King's book is basically done, and we really want to thank everybody who helped out with the editing, with translation, with volunteering in different ways. Because this really is a collective effort, and we did it. So we'll be sending out copies of that soon. Um, in the meantime, we are thinking about pirates. And this is going to be a lot of fun because one of the things which I think, there are no good children's books about pirates. Nika points this out all the time. Uh, there's lots of books about pirates. Everybody thinks kids should be interested in pirates, and often they are, but it often seems like they're trying to make them as boring and unimaginative as possible. I mean, there's a lot of things about pirates that are really interesting and fun that just don't get into the books. And one of the things about pirates that fascinates me personally, and I have a book about pirates, it's only available now in French for various somewhat silly contractual reasons. It'll come out in English someday. But it's a scholarly book. Now, this book that we're going to start doing, this book is a little different. But it starts especially with the idea of stories, because a lot of acting in history means not just acting, but acting in such a way that you kind of set up the story that people are going to say about you afterwards. In fact, one of my very first book that I wrote was about this village in Madagascar. One of the great themes is that political action is acting in such a way that it will be represented to people afterwards. I mean, obviously, you're doing something at the time mostly, but what makes it specifically political is that it influences people by their having heard that you did it, or people who were not there at the time. So there's a manipulation of stories, but generally speaking, like a king goes off and everything he does is there are stories told about it, but he doesn't tell the stories, right? You need somebody, so you're trying to act in such a way that other people will tell stories in the way that you want them to. And of course, the whole thing gets out of control. Now, the interesting thing about pirates is that they were rebels. I mean, pirates are basically outlaws in the sense that anybody had the right to kill them. They were usually mutineers. I'm distinguishing here between pirates and privateers, right? So if we're talking about the 1600s, the sort of golden age of piracy, the 1680, 1690, maybe 1700s, those guys were mostly people who'd mutinied. A lot of them are people who'd been kidnapped to begin with. That's why they were on the ship. They used to grab people on the street and make them sailors. So the guys who'd been kidnapped rose up against the oppressive captain, but they knew that by doing that, there's basically no place they could go. They were wanted everywhere, and there were all these mutual agreements. So they would raise a flag and say, okay, fine, we declare war on all of the world. And in fact, that's what the pirate flag meant. The Jolly Roger, it was a skull with an hourglass, usually. And the hourglass implied, it's just a matter of time. It's not like you're going to die. It's like, we're going to die, but we don't care. We're the living dead. We're living on borrowed time, but we don't mind that. We're going to have fun with it. We should think about it as even scarier in a way. But in keeping themselves alive, which they often did manage to do, a lot of them ended up retiring to Madagascar, actually, and their descendants are still there. I knew some of them when I was in Madagascar 20 years ago. They managed to do it by the manipulation of stories. They actually managed to convince people there was a pirate kingdom in Madagascar, for example, which was sending out phony ambassadors all over Europe, and I think Peter the Great tried to send a couple of ships to support them. They made alliances. They were basically amazing scam artists, and they were constantly telling these crazy stories both to scare people and entrance people about utopian experiments, about terrible, terrible acts of violence. And to this day, it's almost impossible to know what's true. But they were so good at what they did as the arts of propaganda that we're still telling those stories now. So in a way, that's the story that I want to tell. How it is these essentially ordinary people, I mean, they're just guys they grabbed off the street, put in an extraordinary situation, became these geniuses of narrative who managed to change our entire shape of history and what's possible in it, and tell these stories so compelling we're still telling them just as a way to survive.